Welcome to Engedrian. If this is your first time listening, or even if you are returning, be sure to follow us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for additional content, battle maps, and background details. We hope you are enjoying our adventure. Let's see what happens next. Inacel and Theophania move along the road, a few hours after the last of the watchtowers in the thick of the wilds. A small clearing on the left side of the road opens up, and Theophania pulls her cart over. Inacel unhooks her cart and sets it up on its stand. Theophania checks her weapons and nods to Inacel.
I will scout ahead quietly and find an animal, ritual cast my ability to speak with them, and wild shape into that form to see what I can learn. I can do that twice, but then I will need to rest for a bit. Sound good?
Inacel and Theophania make stealth checks. Roll a 9 and a 15. Inacel stumbles a bit on the rocky terrain and ruffles more than one bush trying to make her way through, while Theophania steps more carefully and remains essentially silent. After almost an hour of traversing the woods, Inacel spots a brown bear next to a stream batting the water for fish. She settles behind a rock, out of sight, and begins her ritual. Inacel casts Speak with Animals as a ritual. Uses wild shape into a brown bear. After 10 minutes, she wild shapes into a brown bear and moves closer to the beast by the stream.
Hello, friend.
Inacel moves to within a few feet of the bear and then sits down, showing submission.
Why?
The bear stops batting the water and also sits down.
Exploring the woods for new threats.
Inacel tries to keep the concept simple.
That's new threats. Fear. Many.
Describe the new threats.
Inacel absent-mindedly digs up a few new shiny stones from the stream.
In the dark. Lots of flying not bats. Lots of hooks. Dangerous.
The bear rolls on his side and scratches his belly with his back foot.
Where?
Inacel chews on her paw pad.
Show.
The bear rolls to its feet and begins lumbering through the woods. Inacel follows, as does Theophania at a distance. After 15 minutes of walking, the bear growls and nods its head up and down. Inacel realizes her spell has ended, but she sees the large cave the bear wants to show her. She sits down and yawns, then looks away. The brown bear looks away as well, and then lumbers off through the trees and vanishes. Inacel shapes back into herself, and Theophania joins her.
This cave looks old, not like the eruption we saw with the Kruthic.
Inacel moves closer to the entrance, and Theophania follows. Inacel and Theophania make investigation and perception checks. Roll 18 and 9, and 23 and 7. Theophania does not notice anything about the cave itself, or hear or smell anything in particular. Inacel finds several bone fragments of various ages among the rocks at the mouth of the cave, and can smell a stench of death and decay wafting from the cave itself. She finds a broken fragment of a black hook-like structure, and estimates the total hook was quite large. She pockets all of the items and looks up to Theophania.
Should we explore a bit of the cave while we have some daylight?
Inacel looks back out towards the woods and the mid-morning sun.
Well, what do you suggest?
Theophania puts an arrow on her bow and looks around. Inacel uses wild shape into a giant spider. Inacel smiles and wild shapes into a giant spider. She begins to lumber into the cave. Theophania laughs and turns towards the woods to stand watch. Inacel travels down into the cave quietly, climbing along the walls and ceilings in several places for several minutes. She sees more bone fragments and the carcasses of a deer and a bear. After about half an hour, the natural cave ceiling, floor, and walls are interrupted by a large hole in the floor and left wall. Similar to the eruption they found by the side of the road, this hole appears recent and broken outward, with debris scattered around the mouth. Inacel ventures down into the hole a few hundred feet and sees the new growth of unique cave moss, glowing mushrooms, and several scrambling, chittering creatures she doesn't recognize. Satisfied that this is likely another passage from the Underdark, she returns to the mouth's entrance and scurries out of the cave back to Theophania. She transforms back into herself.
There is another eruption in this cave. Let's return to the cart so I can rest.
Inacel and Theophania continue this survey method for several days and find, along the road between Bethilia and Woodshead, at least 5 unique eruption points. They are careful to be back on the road by nightfall and do not see any creatures other than expected wildlife for the duration. Inacel is able to add quite a few more beasts to her wild shape potential, which are mostly common animals. On their last planned day before returning to Bethilia, they find a small grotto with another cave, but the hare that Inacel speaks with does not seem to think there is anything dangerous about it. As they approach the cave to take a closer look, 3 black panthers emerge from the mouth of the cave. They immediately growl and bare their fangs. Inacel notes that their paws are covered in fresh blood, and they have deep scratches on their shoulders and sides.
Something has attacked them.
She quickly considers casting Speak with Animals and wild shaping, but they have already seen both she and Theophania. The cats move closer, preparing to attack. Everyone rolls for initiative. Theophania casts Hail of Thorns, attacks the Panther B with Longbow. Rolls a 12 versus AC 12 for a hit for 5 damage. The 3 Panthers roll a 12, a 15, and a 17 Dex saving throw versus DC 15. 1 fail, 2 saves, taking 3, 4, and 5 damage. Theophania doesn't hesitate when the 3 Panthers, all side by side, emerge from the cave and move towards them. She first mumbles a few words so that her notched arrow glows with small thorns, then launches the arrow towards the middle panther, striking it in the shoulder. A shower of thorns erupts from the arrow and bombards all 3 panthers. Inacel moves into melee with all 3 panthers, attacks Panther A with Scimitar, attacks Panther B with Hungry Jaws. Rolls 12 versus AC 12 for 10 damage. Panther A collapses. Rolls 13 versus AC 12 for 3 damage. Inacel is concerned that the Panthers may pounce on Theophania and moves into melee with all 3 of them as a barrier. She slashes at the Panther on the left, catching it in the throat and killing it instantly. She then lunges at the Panther in the middle and sinks her teeth into its shoulder. Panther B attacks Inacel with a bite, rolls 10 versus AC 19 for a miss. The wounded middle panther snaps at Inacel after she bites its shoulder, but misses the lizard folk. Panther C attacks Inacel with claw, rolls 21 versus AC 19 for a hit for 5 slashing damage. The panther on the right slashes at Inacel with its claw, scraping her shoulder. Theophania casts Hail of Thorns, attacks Panther B with her longbow, rolls 23 versus AC 12 for a hit for 8 damage, killing it. Panther C makes a Dex saving throw of 17 versus DC 15, saves, takes 2 damage. Protected by Inacel's rush forward, Theophania releases another arrow emboldened with magical thorns, striking the middle panther in the eye, killing it instantly. The magic barrage of thorns tears into the remaining panther. Inacel attacks Panther C with Scimitar, rolls a 24 versus AC 12 for 9 damage, killing it. Inacel turns towards the last panther and slashes with her scimitar, catching it in the throat as well, and it falls dead. Inacel and Theophania receive 75 experience points. Theophania and Inacel examine the panther's bodies and wounds carefully, as well as the cave. Theophania makes a nature and medicine check, and Inacel makes a survival and investigation check. Rolls 20 and 6 and 15 and 8. Theophania manages to skin the hides from all 3 panthers and prepares them with salt, sand, and grass as she'd done before. She salvages 23 pieces of meat weighing 92 pounds and salts it and wraps it in oilcloth. During this process, she cannot determine what had previously attacked the panthers or how long ago. Inacel looks at the wounds and the surrounding cave mouth and sees several kinds of blood, as well as another large broken hook. She ventures into the cave for a few minutes and finds the body of a humanoid, disfigured beyond recognition, with signs of both panther strikes and something more powerful. She examines the body for any identifying items and finds 12 gold pieces, 24 silver pieces, a silver bracelet, a short sword, and the remains of a lute that's been shattered, but nothing else of value. She drags the body to the mouth of the cave and begins digging 4 holes next to a large flowering tree. Once they are deep enough, she places the body of the humanoid and the panthers, along with herbs, flowers, and a few shiny rocks, on the bodies and then buries them. She burns some herbs inside the cave to cleanse it and then returns to Theophania.
I didn't explore too far beyond the body, but I think there is a high likelihood of another eruption here as well.
She pulls a piece of parchment from her bag that they have been using to mark the locations and adds the cave.
I think we've done enough the last couple of days. Let's get back to Pathilia now.
Theophania and Enisel have reached level 3. Theophania chooses Hunter-Ranger archetype and Hunter's Prey, Hordebreaker. Navigating the multiple gateways, pathways, hallways, waiting areas, and enormous rooms filled with courtiers fascinates Peace as Umgren moves through them. With a series of nods, hand gestures, and bows, they find themselves in a small antechamber only an hour after entering the castle from the main gates. They are the only people in the antechamber, and it is quiet and warm, with a fire in the corner knocking the chill off the air. Umgren sits in utter silence, staring at the fire. Peace removes a piece of parchment from their bag and begins composing some draft lines of a poem comparing the grandeur of the castle to an ocean and then to a bamboo forest. They continue to scribble, cross out, make notes, and add new lines for some time. After another hour, a door opens and a servant wearing all white bows and nods for them to enter. Umgren leaps from his chair, turns to Peace to check their appearance, and then enters with Peace in tow.
Ah, Umgren, my loyal servant and most trusted friend. Please come in and sit.
The king is at least half human by Peace's eye, but the other half is unclear. He is very tall, quite handsome, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. He wears only a simple robe of deep blue from a collar to his sandaled feet, with a thin gold belt at his waist. Umgren bows deeply before the king, which Peace mimics, adding their downward turned paws. The king then sits on a red velvet sofa made of dark mahogany wood with a large fire roaring in the background. Umgren sits only after the king, and Peace follows suit. A quick survey of the room reveals that no one is present except the three of them, not even a servant. However, Peace is sure that with a slight gesture, servants would appear.
Kalia, my king, thank you for seeing us, your majesty.
Umgren sits forward in his seat and pulls the map from his pocket. He places it on the table between them. Kalia flicks his wrist, and baubles of bright light appear over the table, illuminating the map. Kalia leans close to it, studies it for a few minutes, and then sits back on the sofa. Umgren wrings his hands gently and also sits back.
An exploration expedition by Santernalfus. Into the Blight. It is as ingenious as it is insane.
Kalia turns his hand to the left, and a goblet of wine appears in it, which is joined by two goblets on the table next to the map, both of which are filled with milk.
But is it a ruse, my king? Could this be a decoy or a distraction? Is this villain warlock a threat? And this map must be ancient. Who is she in league with?
Umgren takes the goblet of milk and sips it. Peace looks at him curiously, takes their own goblet, and sips it a bit more aggressively.
Enegrin Chilpira, yes. She is what we will have to call a necessary evil. I must deal with all manner of people as king, Umgren. I must meet with some of them in public, and some of them in private, like you. My information is that Chilpira must be left alone for the time being. I leave it to your bugbear friend to reduce the threats of the contracts she has out on your lives. Burn Pathilia to the ground. That, my friend, is the ruse, I think. She can't possibly hope to succeed. No, the real question is, what is Santernalfus really up to? I doubt this blight map is genuine, likely a plant for distraction, but I could be wrong. I would appreciate it if you could leave this with me and let me examine it properly. And Enegrin, all talk and no action. I do believe she is a valuable asset for keeping tabs on one possible threat. Tell me, Umgren, what is happening in the Underdark as we speak?
Kalia finishes his wine and seems to drop the glass, but it vanishes in midair.
The Underdark. I can only tell you that our travels here, we saw what appeared to be an eruption from the Underdark of Kufix. Some of our people returned to the wilds to investigate further, a druid and a ranger. I hope they will bring us news that this was a freak incident and not something more.
Umgren finishes his milk and he sets his goblet down. It vanishes.
Enisel Zalani is a true friend of the court. I have known her parents for years. They are one of my main peacekeeping tools with Oldestal. She's kind beyond measure. and Theophania is one of my most trusted, but she refuses to take a position in my court. Always wants to be in the wilds. Clever girl. My mother was very fond of the wilds, you know. When NSL and Theophania return, please get their report to me as quickly as possible. The Navy in the southeast grows bored with inactivity, and the towers have seen nothing for months. Centurnalfus is always plotting, Umgurn. We must root out what they are up to and get ahead of it. As always, you are my friend.
Kalia stands and moves back towards his large desk, sitting in front of the magnificent window with the view of the mountains illuminated by the midday Isvara.
We will take our leave.
Umgurn stands to leave, nods to Peace, and heads towards the door they entered. Kalia looks back at both of them and smiles.
Piece of the puzzle. Our little multiverse traveler. Is there nothing that you wish to say to the King of Pythilia, or ask?
Peace feels their face go blush under their fur and bows as gracefully as possible.
Your Majesty, we are here by accident and have thoroughly enjoyed wandering in your kingdom. For our people, there is no greater honor than to have us recite a poem at your behest.
Kalia turns towards Peace directly, and his face goes stern and focused. He gives a quick nod. Peace thinks deeply to their favorite poem of home, something short, to not offend, and begins to recite the verse with a melodious tone and soft sound. The king's face remains stern throughout, unmoving, staring deeply into Peace's eyes. After the last line, Peace bows deeply for half a minute and then stands. Kalia has moved to stand directly in front of him.
You are truly a gift to your people, and I am sure they are heartbroken to have lost you. However, the kingdom of Pythilia is indebted to the beauty which your verse and prose bring to us. You are welcome to my court to recite your work anytime you like.
With that, the king bows impossibly low to Peace, who is instantly mortified, unsure what to do. When the king rises, he places an object in Peace's hands and folds his own hands over theirs.
May the peace and light of Isvara ever shine on you, piece of the puzzle.
The king turns away and strides to the far corner of the room, where he vanishes through a door and a curtain. Peace looks at Umgurn with wide eyes.
Let's just go, and we can talk about that later.
Umgurn hurries to the door, and Peace follows. Within an hour, they are entering the Salted Pig. Fodinas, Malaysia, and Case are sitting in a corner eating a hearty stew and drinking a strong ale.
How did it go with the, other folks?
Umgurn sits down and waves to the barmaid to bring over stew and a few drinks for Peace and himself. Fodinas looks up from his stew, smiles, and then relays the entire events in the depth of the monastery. He shows off the new handles of his daggers and their ability to go dark. Malaysia pulls his necklace from his shirt. Case explains the new approach to strength and fitness, which makes Peace exceedingly happy and giddy for the rest of the evening. And they all recount, in rounds, the mind flayer who seeks memory control of others, the treachery and trust of Inakrin, and the fate of Fodinas' own memories. When they conclude, Umgurn is silent for many minutes while Peace describes the castle in detail and the magnificence of King Kalia. Umgurn clears his throat.
We are at a crossroads, my friends. Is Inakrin's threat of burning down the city real, or is this map of the blight real, or a distraction? Is Fodinas' mind flayer a threat or a decoy? The king was greatly concerned with the Underdark. I believe we must wait for Inosel and Theophania to return and then reassess. Today has been most troubling. I must retire for the evening to gather my thoughts. I do not expect Inosel and Theophania for 4 more days. You know where to find me if you need me, and please keep a watch on Malaysia.
With that, he stands and strides quickly to bed. After he leaves, Peace smiles.
Look, the king gave me this.
They open their palm to reveal a ruby the size of a walnut. Fodinas gently takes it from Peace, holds it up to the light of a candle, and whistles.
This is a very valuable gem piece. I'd suggest you keep it for now, as it's easier to hide, and you can always convert it to gold.
Fodinas smiles and sits back in his chair.
Fodinas, we care not for gold, but this was a gift in return for our poetry from the king. It could be a river stone, and we would be just as delighted.
Peace tucks the ruby away, and Fodinas smirks. Case pats Peace on the shoulder, which makes Peace purr with delight. Malaysia sits up and puts his hands on the table.
We are in the big city. What are we doing for the next 4 days?
The party spends one Quinn day on downtime activities while they await the return of Inicel and Theophania. Umgurn, distressed by recent events and in need of guidance, spends 3 days praying at various temples and churches throughout Pathilia. Umgurn makes 3 charisma checks versus possibility of divine guidance. DC roll 2d20. Rolls a 20, an 8, and a 19 versus 22, 38, and 24. Despite his constant prayer and devout consultation, no divine inspiration comes to him. Umgurn spends 1 day in the library of the Fairhope Monastery, the largest in the city, which includes access to the secret archives of the Mind Flayers, although that is not publicly known, searching for any information to assist him with the issues of the Underdark, the Blight, and Santernalfuse. Umgurn makes an investigation check with advantage versus a tiered DC 5 to 20. Rolls a 14. His search finds a limited history of what is known of Santernalfuse, a history of the interactions with Drow and the surface world, and a limited text on what is known of the Blight. He can find nothing about the Blight before it was destroyed, nor anything about the details of modern Santernalfuse. He spends the last days in conversation with the general of the King's army and the admiral of the King's navy, who both were in Pathilia for a military funeral. Umgurn makes a persuasion check versus 2 insight checks, rolls a 14 versus a 4 and a 13. Over glasses of wine in celebration of their fallen comrade, both the general and the admiral are very open with Umgurn about the current status of the king's forces. The general confirms that outside of Pathilia, where there are always 10 garrisons of 20 soldiers, each throughout the city, each city in Pathilia has between 2 and 4 garrisons of 5 to 10 soldiers each. The exception, of course, is Plandino and Pendergrin, which are the reserves towns, and each have 250 soldiers ready to travel to any town in Pathilius. The Great Wall, a relic of the Thrum Empire, is mostly uninhabited except for limited security troops that regulate the border with Devonmere, primarily for commerce and trade. The admiral similarly describes the naval might of the king as being concentrated in South Canville, Rigel's Hope, the Fingers, and Canville Port, where more than a dozen ships serve each. A smaller force of 8 ships serve Shaybrook and the east. The admiral reports mostly an inactive status off the shores of Santernalfuse and peace in the shipping lanes her army protects. She notes that every other week at least 1 ship makes the passage close to the shore of the Blight, and nothing has been seen there for years. Umgurn spends all of his evenings covering the night guard for Pathilia and earns 31 gold pieces. The Salty Pig lodging and meals cost him 5 gold pieces per day, 25 gold pieces total for the week. Fodinus spends the week mostly guarding Malaysia during the day and night, alternating with Case, which includes quite a bit of shopping at the shops of Pathilia, as they are overwhelming for Malaysia. During his time shopping, he finds a few random items. Fodinus rolls 4d100 on the trinket table, rolls 29, 41, 52, and 59. He finds and purchases a pair of old plaid socks which have his initials FO on them, a scrap of cloth from the banner of an army of Thrum, 2 toy soldiers in King's army garb that are bugbears, but one is missing a head, and a rabbit's foot on a silver chain, for a total cost of 21 gold pieces. Fodinus, when he is not guarding Malaysia, connects with the local rogues' den and pursues the contracts available for assassinations. He finds, not surprisingly, a contract for any fire genasi for 10,000 gold pieces, which requires delivery of the heart. There's a second contract for a clergy for 7,500 gold pieces, which is definitely not in Fodinus' forte. The third is for Redgwick of the House of Hollowborn for 5,000 gold pieces. Fodinus spends time in the den subtly looking for information about all 3 contracts. Fodinus makes 3 deception checks versus 3 insight checks. Rolls 15, 18, and 24, natural 20, versus 8, 14, and 19. Fodinus confirms that Inakrin Chilpira has taken out the contract on Malaysia, and the payment upon delivery of the heart is to happen at the Fractured Crown, a notorious bar and brothel on the northern edge of Pathilia. The clergyman is the brother of a local businessman whose business recently began to boom because his main competition in artisan brass and copperware, along with his entire family, were burned to death in their home. Fodinus notes that such a revenge contract is likely not well accepted by most of the community and will probably never be fulfilled. Redrick of the House of Hollowborn is a recent arrival from Cantheria who appears to be a fraud or con man and has a proclivity for physically abusing brothel workers. Fodinus determines that the source of this contract is likely the local authorities who are looking for quiet justice to remove this scum from their town. Fodinus elects to accept his contract and easily locates Redrick, who is a loud, obnoxious, and draws attention to himself frequently. As Redrick is leaving a tavern, or possibly was thrown out, Fodinus follows him and watches for a dark, isolated place to strike. Fodinus makes a perception check and a stealth check versus perception check with disadvantage. Drunk rolls a 13 and a 15 versus a 14. Redrick turns down an alley, which Fodinus can tell is fairly dark, and he slips quietly down the alley to follow him. Halfway down, with only light from either end of the alley, Fodinus attempts to grab him from behind and slice his throat quietly. Fodinus attacks Redrick with dagger. Advantage, assassinate, surprise, sneak attack. Rolls 26 autocritical versus AC 14 for 30 slashing damage. Redrick silently leaves the world before his body even hits the ground. Fodinus searches the body and finds 20 platinum pieces, 30 gold pieces, and 500 silver pieces, 2 gold rings with gemstones, a gold chain with a gemstone pendant, a gold bracelet inlaid with onyx, 2 daggers, and a fine red cape with gold embroidery. The body has a tattoo on its forearm, which was listed in the contract as the proof of death. Fodinus extracts the tattoo and puts it into the belt pouch from the body. In the pocket of the tunic on the body, Fodinus finds a series of letters from a person named Elrissa Gatterly, at least 10 of them, along with an unsent letter addressed to Elrissa in Pathilia. Fodinus makes an intelligence check, DC 10, rolls a 9. He can't quite recall where that address might be in the city, as he has limited experience with Pathilia outside of this week. He stows the letters as well. Later that evening, he returns to the den and gives the Master of Contracts the pouch and collects his payment. Fodinus receives 5,000 gold pieces. He leaves the den and heads to a local fence that was suggested to him by the Master of Contracts. Not surprisingly, all of the jewelry is fake and the daggers are mundane. The cape is of very fine quality, and the fence informs Fodinus that a shop in the Ardmore district on the west side of town sells these capes, and they are very expensive. Fodinus makes an intelligence check, DC 10, rolls a 4. He does not know anything about that area of town. He accepts 100 gold pieces for the cape, as the fence assures him it will be hard to sell. Fodinus receives 100 gold pieces and gives away all of the contraband from the body, save the letters. During the week, his gambling kicks into high gear, as Malaysia is very interested to learn as many of the games as possible. Fodinus gambles all 5 days while guarding Malaysia. He does not attend any caged fighting matches. Fodinus makes 5 gaming checks, sleight of hand, versus DC 2d20. Rolls 23, 22, 20, 15, 11, versus 29, 15, 12, 36, and 35. 2 successes, rewarding 2d20 times 10 gold pieces. 3 failures, costing 3d20 times 10 gold pieces. Wins 320, loses 290, up 30 gold pieces for the week. Having to keep one eye on Malaysia while gambling prevents Fodinus from focusing, and his gambling skills are not superior. But Malaysia follows the rules of the games by the end of the Quinn day. The Salty Pig lodging and meals cost Fodinus 5 gold pieces per day, 25 gold pieces total for the Quinn day. Case is happy to escort Malaysia around during the Quinn day, providing him protection while he shops. Case has little interest in shopping and lets Fodinus deal with those activities. Case does manage to find the local cage fighting matches in Pathilia, which he never experienced during his brief time after emerging from the sewer. He approaches the master of the matches, Bevel Hardstrung, a halfling like the one in Woods Head.
Case, Amber Dream? I know you. My cousin runs the Woods Head's matches and told me of your first match. Are you ready to try your luck in our arena?
Bevel writhes his hands greedily, considering what odds he can set to tempt or scare bettors.
You will find enough contenders for a match every night here.
I accept.
Case shakes the halfling's tiny hand and spends the next 5 nights for less than half an hour engaged in a cage match with Malaysia watching from the safety of the audience and 2 enormous brutes that Case entreated to guard him during the matches. On the first night, Case's opponent is a bugbear who is tall and lanky named Brank Tovith. The match begins with Case throwing the first punch, which doubles over the furry fighter. Brank responds with a weak uppercut, which barely grazes Case's jaw. With his stance open from the uppercut, Case punches Brank solidly in the face, knocking him unconscious. On the second night, a half-orc named Thagar Gudum is the challenger. He is a bit weakly looking to Case, but has a lot of bulk. Case again comes out strong with a face punch, to which Thagar responds with a weak gut blow. Case counters with an even harder blow to Thagar's face. The half-orc responds with another weak punch. The half-orc seems delirious, and Case takes a light swing at him, missing, in hopes Thagar will land a solid punch to make the fight seem fair. But the half-orc's swing is mistimed, and he does not land the blow. Case sighs and punches Thagar directly in the face, dropping him to the cage floor. The third night, a beefy human wearing only pants, but with massive arms, enters the cage. He is called only Roy. When the match starts, Roy rushes at Case and throws an off-target punch, which he catches in his own paw and responds with a solid punch to Roy's belly. Roy snatches back his hand and tries to spin around and backhand Case across the face. Case catches his forearm and punches him directly in the face, dropping him to the cage floor. At the conclusion of the evening, Case finds Bevel counting coins in the corner.
Bevel, these matches are not enjoyable. I am beating your sad contenders nearly to a pulp.
Bevel smiles devilishly.
Very well. Tomorrow, you will have a real contender.
On the fourth night, Case enters the cage and is greeted by what may be a half-giant, but he is unsure. Rather than saying its name, it simply grunts at him. The opponent's fists are the size of Case's head, and its arms are larger than Case's thighs. The half-giant rushes forward and swings an open palm at Case, catching him in the ribs. Case counters with a swing, but the blow seems to hit steel. The beast backhands Case in the face hard, stunning him and causing his counterswing to miss widely and pathetically. The creature laughs loudly, and its next punch misses as Case dodges to the left. With some advantage, Case throws a punch to the creature's open face and lands a solid blow. One of its teeth fall out. The creature smiles and uppercuts Case, which is the last thing Case remembers. When he awakens, some time later, he is all smiles when Bevel comes to see him.
That was a fight.
Case is laughing.
More like a slaughter, but an excellent show for the crowd. And then, of course, there were the odds. Thank you.
Bevel laughs heartily and walks away. On the last night of the week, Case enters the cage and sees a large dragon man pumping his arms for the crowd and blowing puffs of fiery breath from his mouth. Case smiles at yet another worthy adversary. When the match starts, Case rushes with the scaly foe and swings hard, but the blow lands against a solid abdomen that feels like stone. The dragon man returns the punch and knocks Case 5 feet backwards with a wallop. Case takes a breath, leaps into the air, and brings both fists together and down on the foe's neck and shoulder. The dragon man stumbles back a few feet and tries to return the punch, but misses within inches of Case's jaw. Dodging the blow, Case throws a solid punch at the staggering dragon man, catching him in the throat. With a gasping breath of fire and smoke, he falls. Case wins 4 of the 5 matches and receives 100 gold pieces for every match, plus 200 gold pieces for every win. 1,300 gold pieces total.
Case receives 1,300 gold pieces.
One late afternoon, Malage asks Case to accompany him back to the Mind Flayer colony so that he can spend several hours with Drabask, Tazgam, and Ruafim, which he does. During this time, Case reads a book loaned to him by Ruafim on maps of the Underdark of Angedrian.
Case makes an intelligence check, DC 18, rolls 19.
The layout, names, and places of the various Underdark cities and connections throughout Angedrian is easily understood and processed by Case. He has memorized all of the relevant cities under or near Pithilius and most of the neighboring landmasses. He takes some notes on parchment provided by Ruafim.
Case can now add his proficiency bonus to any checks made while navigating on the surface to the cities of the Underdark or while traveling in the Underdark near Pithilia, including survival, nature, investigation, insight, and history.
The Salty Pig lodging and meals cost Case 5 gold pieces per day, 25 gold pieces total for the Quinn Day, gifts and tributes from admirers at the cage matches, and while he works out in the morning provides him an additional 640 gold pieces.
Case is now 3rd level. Case chooses Echo Knight martial archetype.
Malaysia does not look forward to the week of being guarded and escorted all over the city and loathes what Innikrin is forcing his colleagues to endure. He would prefer to perform in the street with his hair on fire, but Umgurn has forbidden him from being seen out of disguise, which Fodinus applies daily. Still, with his bodyguards, he finds time to go shopping. He purchases a very fine set of woodcarver's tools for 10 gold pieces. He also finds a tailor shop that makes him a fine performance costume for juggling and playing with fire, including sleeveless fire-retardant vest, billowing breeches with tapered ankles, and a pair of red and orange sparkling slippers at a cost of 75 gold pieces.
Malaysia pays 85 gold pieces for very fine woodcarver's tools and fine fire juggling clothes.
Malaysia hangs out in the gambling halls and taverns with Fodinus while he gambles during the week and observes him playing for many hours. He chooses not to gamble, but learns the basics and some strategic concepts. During the late afternoons into the evening with Case, Malaysia spends time in the Fairhope Monastery library, sometimes seeing Umgurn, and does his best to research elemental planes and planar travel, as well as warlocks, patrons, and demons.
Malaysia makes 2 investigation checks and 2 paired intelligence checks, rolls a 16 with a 14 and a 12 with a 15.
Malaysia is able to locate several books on the lore, knowledge, and understanding of the elemental planes, as well as books on planar travel. He spends quite a bit of time studying them, and by the time he has become mentally exhausted from the topic, he has gained a basic understanding of the planes of existence, their descriptions, and relative locations. He understands the various forms of planar travel and how it might be achieved. He does not feel comfortable with attempting planar travel based on what he's read. He also concludes that planar travel is very different from multiverse travel, so he has no insights for Peace or Case. Malaysia can only find a few books on warlocks, patrons, and demons. However, he gains an understanding of the pact magic of warlocks and their relationship to their patrons. He finds an illustrated history of famous warlocks and their patrons. He learns that demons and many other beings from beyond the material plane have and can serve as patrons, but with various costs to their warlocks. He is not able to learn anything specific about Varkadar beyond what he already learned from the Mind Flayers, and does not have any further insights into Innikrin and Varkadar's relationship. Malaysia goes to the cage fighting matches with Case, as Case is guarding him, and they befriend 2 large half-ogres named Breg and Krog, who keep an eye on Malaysia while Case is in the arena. The master of the caged matches sets the odds for Case's first match at 25-1, and Malaysia bets 25 gold pieces, winning 525 gold pieces. For the second match, the odds rose to 10-1, but Malaysia was very confident in Case and bet 100 gold pieces, winning 1,000 gold pieces. The third match, the odds rose to 3-1, and Malaysia was concerned the opponent might be very strong, so he didn't bet and lost no funds. For the fourth match, the odds dropped back to 25-1. Watching Fodinus bet during the day, Malaysia knows that Fodinus would have bet big on such a chance to score, but Malaysia is cautious. He looks carefully at the other fighter for the match and sees that he appears a bit larger than Case and his muscles seem bulkier. But Malaysia has a gut feeling that Case can beat him and bets 750 gold pieces. But Case loses the match. Malaysia decides not to bet on any more matches until he has discussed it with Case and Fodinus.
Malaysia receives a net winnings of 775 gold pieces.
Malaysia accepts the Mind Flayer's offer and returns to visit them one afternoon with Case. Although he has many questions, he focuses on one for the discussion.
To ask, what did the forces of Centaurus do to the kingdom now known as the Blight? What kind of weapon?
Drabask pauses as if to consider how much it should reveal of a very long and complicated story, and its tentacles seem to settle quietly into a bundle on its chest.
This world is filled with magic, and the people of this world rely on magic more often than they should. There are many sources of magic, and about 500 Isvarana ago, there was even a new influx of a new font of power which has fueled society's current dependence. But the history of this planet's humanoid populations is vast and long. We do not concern ourselves with it or the details, but we will tell you that this world has previously had a very deep and powerful grasp of the natural truth of the world, some call science. Our power, for example, though alien to this world, comes from the natural power of the mind and the biology of our forms. The combination of our biology and your magic, for example, is what the demon seeks to fuse for his machinations. Back to this science. You have obviously seen Isvara, as it is called, in the sky. Although the people of this world think it is a dragon that gave birth to the universe, it is in fact a giant ball of gases composed of one type of simple substance that fuses to form another more complicated substance, resulting in the creation of heat. This process is called fusion. Similarly, it is possible to split an existing substance into two new substances, which is releasing energy. That process is called fission, and the energy released is sometimes called radiation. Radiation is very dangerous as it destroys the fabric of living beings or mutates them, but radiation can occur naturally in many substances that are often found deep in the soil. Our understanding of the weapon that destroyed the kingdom, now known as the Blight, was a combination of immense dragon fire and the seeding of the land of the kingdom with substances producing radiation. The result was death and destruction from the dragon fire and the prevention of life or habitation from the radiation. The forces of Centernalfus, we believe, were experimenting with the weapon when they created the Blight. Clearly, nothing living can venture there.
Drabask pauses with his eyes wide as if to look for a sign of confusion or distrust from Alege, but also hoping that the little Genasi would provide his view on the topic.
This radiation you speak of, as it occurs naturally in the world, must have a balance. It must dissipate over time. Otherwise, the whole world would not be habitable. If the Blight was created many hundreds of years ago, theoretically, the radiation from the seeding could be dissipating. Is it possible that the dates on the map we obtained from Enigrin are when the Blight is safe to enter? Or perhaps it is already safe to enter, but they are planning it strategically. Let's assume this knowledge about the natural world and radiation is true. How would the forces of Centernalfus have obtained it so long ago?
Malage sits back in his chair and strokes his chin.
Most clever, most clever. Yes, Malage, it is known that radiation dissipates, just as you say, and natural radiation dissipates faster. Importantly, it can also be absorbed by certain materials. It is theorized that there are even organisms that can consume and render it harmless, using it as an energy source. Where this knowledge comes from is part of the dark history of this world. In the past, the humanoids harnessed the power of fission and fusion. The result was an end to their civilization. We fear that some remnant of that knowledge persisted. Enough, at least, for the dark forces of Centernalfus to weaponize it, though nowhere near to the degree of the ancients.
Drabask closes its hands together and its tentacles undulate slightly.
Drabask, I think it is imperative that we gain some insight into the state of the Blight safely. What would you suggest for exploring the Blight safely?
Malage leans forward with his hands on the desk.
Only the ground of the Blight is uninhabitable, Malage.
Drabask pauses, testing Malage's intellect.
Malage makes an intelligence check. Rolls 20.
Oh, yes. We have to go. We need to figure out how we can fly over the Blight.
Malage waves to Drabask, whose tentacles are undulating with what looks like glee. The Salty Pig lodging and meals cost Malage 5 gold pieces per day, 25 gold pieces total for the Quende. Thank you for visiting Engedrian. Don't forget to find us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for additional content, battle maps, and background details. We hope you're enjoying our adventure. We can't wait to hear what happens next.